We begin tonight in Ontario, where changes to freedom of information laws are raising a bigger question, not just one about one province, but accountability across the country. Ontario is moving to limit access to communications tied to the Premier and Minister's phone calls. Now, Premier Doug Ford defended the move during a scrum with reporters yesterday.
Anything that we do goes to the Ontario Public Service, and you can review it, anything, and there's a ton of information going to the Ontario Public Service, so you can look into that. But when it comes to a conversation within cabinet and on personal cell phones, that's not, should be FYable. And I know you guys. You'll pull up every single number and someone's health records, and you'll do everything you can if you don't see eye to eye with someone. But what we're focused on is making sure that any confidential information, be it myself or any other cabinet minister, gets a call or a message from constituents, it stays confidential. It's as simple as that.
Look at that, Eddie. Despite what I did beforehand. Anyhow, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation says Premier Doug Ford is trying to hide records from the public and roll back the ability of everyday taxpayers from holding the government accountable, said Noah Jarvis, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation Ontario director. Quote, "What is Ford and his cabinet trying to hide? Every document the government produces belongs to the taxpayers because taxpayers fund the government and it is supposed to serve the people," said Jarvis. "Politicians only want to hide documents from taxpayers if they're doing something wrong or wasting a taxpayer's dollars." Now, Ford needs to backtrack on this outrageous attempt to dodge accountability by hiding government records from the people. And of course, that was part of their news release that they sent out on the 13th of March this year, when this was first announced by the Premier. Eddie, Doug Ford tried to explain it away as it's just on the telephone communications, and he is, like one of the reporters said, "You said we're going to be transparent," and he said, "I am." He said, "I give out my telephone," and he does. He gives out his cell phone number to just about anyone who asks, and he will answer the phone. However, and he used the word personal as far as the phone was concerned. Those are government-issued phones. They're not personal phones. I'm sorry, Doug, you kind of went off the skids there using the term personal. They are government phones, and they belong to the government. Hence, they belong to the taxpayers. And you better be careful as to how you are using them. Now, this all seems to go back to about a year ago. There was maybe a year and a half. There was a big land scandal where developers were making deals and pushing ahead in areas where there was a lot of opposition and everything. And part of the push to get to the bottom of it, there were requests through the Right to Information or Freedom of Information Act for documentation as to phone calls, times and length, and all of the sort of records you get with a cell phone when you ask for that kind of information. And it seems the critics say that what he's trying to do now is close a door so that whatever discussions take place on the taxpayer's phone do not reach the taxpayers. And you notice how he said, what we're going to do is the public service gets everything. Well, they get everything, but they don't necessarily give everything out. And part of not getting everything will be like these telephone records. And it starts with the telephone records, but then where else does it go?
Yeah, exactly. And I saw his piece in the excerpt that you just showed, and he seemed very personable in terms of his message. He was actually speaking to people. Okay, and I agree with you 100%, Gary. He mentioned personal calls, and the first thing that kind of came to my attention was, well, yeah, they're personal calls. And then, wait a minute, you're using government issued technology to conduct your personal business. No, it no longer is personal. And, I get what he's trying to say. If he's having a conversation with a constituent, I guess he's trying to follow HEPA rules where, health information is private and won't divulge it. I think he's trying to take the same approach with this, but not when it comes to communication using public utilities or public services or anything paid by the taxpayer. If he truly is conducting personal business, use your personal cell phone. There's no access to that. Shouldn't be any access to that unless you're breaking some sort of a line that's subpoenaed. But no, I think he was very passionate about his move to try to get this done through Stephen Crawford as well, his public and business service delivery and procurement minister. But I'm with you, Gary, in this one. I agree. Anything that's being said, done, conducted as part of government business, it really should be under some form of scrutiny, and that's where professionals like yourself, Gary, broadcast journalists and journalists in general, should have direct access to this upon request. And in terms of the individual that you mentioned before, who was critical of this, I think he's absolutely right. Why would you want to push something like this ahead unless there's something that you are trying to hide? Otherwise, why push the agenda, right? Personally, I'm kind of surprised by him pushing for this. I'm really not for it. It certainly does dilute transparency, in my opinion. And the last thing I think we need to do in this country is provide any sort of authority for carte blanche for governments. Everything has to be under scrutiny. Now, from a federal perspective, I clearly understand secrecy when it comes to national security issues. I mean, stuff does get conducted, but in terms of day-to-day management of our country, how we're spending our money, why we're spending our money, why certain policies are put into place, I'm sorry, man, that's got to be open to everyone. And that's the only way you ensure that accountability is not eviscerated and thrown out the window, if you want to put it. And think about it, Gary. Alberta and Quebec and partially Saskatchewan, with their movements with upcoming referendums and separation. You know what? I don't want any backdoor discussion in politics by these individuals that are trying to separate our country. This has to remain under public scrutiny. So I'm with you, Gary. We're a democracy. We are not the present USA under President say UPID, and we're not an authoritarian society. We are Canada. We are Canadians, and I really don't think that our politicians should have any sort of filter in terms of access to information.
Well, I did a bit of research on the topic, Eddie, and here's how it breaks down. I went in and I asked what I was looking for was, is it becoming more difficult to get answers when filing a right to information request at the federal, provincial, and in a lot of cases, the municipal level in Canada? And what I'm finding is that it's common and documented, well documented. There's a lot of frustration. The consensus among many journalists, as you mentioned, researchers, legal experts, is that indeed it has become more difficult to get timely and complete answers. Now, while the laws are designed to ensure transparency, several systemic hurdles have intensified in recent years across all three levels of government. Here's some how the process feels and why, and it's more often restrictive than anything. At the federal level, access delayed is access denied.
Mm-hmm.
The federal system is currently facing what the Information Commissioner of Canada, Carolyn Maynard, has called a critical state. Chronic delays. Despite the legislated 30-day limit, extensions are now the norm. As of early this year, the Office of the Information Commissioner reports a significant percentage of requests take over 6 months, with many stretching past a year. It's ridiculous. And
A year's
part
news.
of, yeah,
Wow.
part of it is, here's the other part of it. Some of the cuts to the public service that have been taking place over the last few weeks at the federal level, cuts right there in the office of the Information Commissioner, the people who actually handle the requests and work on fulfilling the requests. Basically, there's a lot of information to dig through to get what you need to fulfill the request, including Hansard. Well, my response to that is, yes, you need a lot of people to start going through binders and binders and file folders of stuff. This is 2026, the 21st century. The federal government, at the very least, should be setting the example. This all should be digital. And all they have to do is go in and type in a few keywords and bang, up it comes. And then they can pull the information they need and put it into the response to the request for information. But that's not the case. I mean, for God's sakes, you still have the federal government using fax machines in some areas. Like, really? Seriously? Anyway, administrative convenience proposals. Recent federal reviews, including the 2025-2026 policy discussions, have sparked controversy. Critics argue the government is focused more on easing the administrative burden for departments, such as by allowing them to ignore repetitive requests rather than strengthening the public's right to know, and the black hole of cabinet confidence. Many records are entirely excluded because they are labeled cabinet confidences, a category the Information Commissioner still cannot independently review to verify if the secrecy is justified. And at the provincial level, it's not really any better. Provincial bodies often cite a lack of resources, personnel to handle the increasing volume and complexity of digital records. There's also a growing trend of invoking commercial secrecy or internal deliberations to redact large portions of documents, especially regarding provincial contracts and infrastructure projects. And backlogs. If a request is denied and you appeal to the CAI, the wait for a hearing can be, are you ready for this? Several years, Eddie. Several years, effectively killing the news value or immediate relevance of the information.
The government could change in that time.
Exactly. Then you have, at the municipal level, the new frontier of secrecy, because they're the most difficult to navigate because they have fewer dedicated staff for access requests. And I would suggest that some of the smaller municipalities may not even realize they fall under right to information. Variable transparency. Small municipalities may have no specialized officer, leading to unintentional delays, while large cities like Montreal or Toronto face such high volumes they struggle to meet deadlines. Informal denials. At the municipal level, officials sometimes steer requesters toward informal processes that lack the legal teeth of a formal request, often resulting in less information being shared. And fees. While federal fees are capped at $5, municipal fees for search and preparation can occasionally scale into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for complex requests, acting as a financial barrier. So, the short strokes of it, at the federal level, the primary hurdle, endless extensions and consultation delays. The current status, the system is plagued by backlog. Reform is slow, or in a lot of cases, non-existent. At the provincial level, heavy redactions, blacked out text, overburdened oversight bodies with long appeal wait times. And at the municipal levels, high fees and lack of specialized staff, which leads to inconsistent and often relies on informal, non-binding information. That is the state of our right to information in this country.
Don't make it easy, do they?
Pretty. It's not pretty at all. I vaguely remember when this was the real push. It was almost like the in thing to do. And everything's going to be so open, and everything's going to be up for discussion. And you are the taxpayer, you have a right to know. Yeah, sounds good when you speak it, but the reality of it is that's not the case.
It almost sounds like our permissions to access this information stops at the voting booth. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Essentially, election day, once all of the commercials stop playing and you go in to mark your X,
Right.
and it's pretty much game over from there. Good luck trying to, and a lot of people just give up. They may have a legitimate reason to be requesting the information, but delay after delay, and they just give up. There was one the CBC did, I think it was in New Brunswick, and it took them, it was almost 2 years. I think it wasn't, they only received the information recently. And
Goodness.
really, the story itself was basically a dead story. The only thing coming out of it that was fresh was we finally got the information.
Right.
But, and as you say, governments change, people pass on, and that delay waters down whatever the impact of the information you were seeking has in the long run.
Well, you know what, Gary, we've talked about this, the digitization of the analog world on many occasions over many coffees and whatever else we were drinking at the time. The digitization of the old analog world, it actually makes access to information that much simpler and that much easier if you permit the access. It all comes down to the permissions that you might put in any sort of document. And yes, you know what, redactions and so on and so forth might apply if it's if they deal with confidentiality issues. Or no, not that. Forget about that. I'll take that back. If it relates to security issues of the public, I understand that. For them to be making excuses, well, it's too complex to deal with. Oh, it's not. Gary, you said, the federal government are still using fax machines. You know what? Our hospitals are using fax machines to communicate information back and forth. We're constantly being asked to send a fax. What do you mean send a fax? There's no reason for this, especially blocking access to information, than to do exactly that, block access to information and make it extremely difficult. And when you said, Gary, on a municipal level somewhere, yes, it's going to cost you $100,000 to get this document. Well, that's kind of like discouraging anybody from gaining access to information. So, A, why are you making it difficult? B, why do you want to block us from it? And C, why do you want to charge us a fortune to get that information? So obviously, to me, as a common fellow, regular day-to-day guy who pays his taxes, why would you want to do that unless you're trying to finagle something or hide something? So, yeah, I at the end of the day, Gary, I just don't get this, and there's absolutely no reason from a technology perspective, once the information is digitized, that it's not available very, very easily. And for it to take 2-3 years to get it out to you, well, that's red tape. That's just somebody saying, yes, we can give this. No, we don't want to give this, and that's the end of that. And you know what? I think to hold our governments accountable, yes, you know what? We have deficits and whatnot, and we've seen waste galore by all levels of government in this country. Access to information, it ensures accountability of our government leaders and the government bodies. And there should be some priority put on this as far as I'm concerned.
It boils down, Eddie, to public trust. Transparency is a cornerstone of democracy, or has been. Let's put it that way. And so you have to ask yourself, what happens when access like this is eroding? Well, the public starts, and you hear it almost every day. Like you hear somebody say, "I don't trust the government anymore." So it's one of those things that, it's access to information is one of the few tools that we as citizens and journalists have to hold power accountable. So, if it's weakened, then, oversight becomes harder, and trust in institutions continues to decline to a point where who knows what happens.
Gary, in your long career as a broadcast journalist, do you find that this country has been pretty decent in terms of access to information, both from, let's start from municipal up to the federal government level? You as a broadcast journalist, were you ever thrown monstrous roadblocks to overcome to get access to important information? I mean, how easy has it been? And, can we say as Canadians, we can set ourselves apart from a lot of the other nations nowadays in
No,
terms of access to this information?
no. I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but no, it's really an uphill battle to try and carry through. The odd thing slips through fairly quickly, but for the most part, no. And there's always an excuse. It's, some of the excuses are legitimate. I get it, but every time you file one and you run into an issue, there's always an excuse. And so it just drags on and on and on. And, you can sit down with pretty much any working journalist today and they will tell you the same thing. It hasn't gotten any better. It's getting worse. And the thing here is, Doug Ford is selling this particular change as really just sort of a minor change. But the minute you start changing anything in right to information requests or the act, you are opening the door, because he says, well, at the federal level, they're doing this now, and, other provinces across the country, we're just following suit. But once you start doing things like this, especially with acts like this, where as they exist now, are far, far, far from perfect. Mm-hmm. And you start chipping away at them because you got caught with your hand in the cookie jar, or something else came up and, your government was embarrassed. Whatever the reasoning, it all comes back to the government in power, the party in power at the time. You start chipping away, and very quickly, because the average person on the street, until they have to access that system, or they know of someone accessing the system or trying to access the system, they don't understand, or it doesn't matter to them. And meantime, the more it doesn't matter, the more you don't pay attention, the easier it becomes to just keep chipping away, right, as the government in power, until you have that act fine-tuned to what works best for you. Mm-hmm. Never mind the taxpayer, but what works best for you. And the taxpayer loses what little bit of access and control they have in trying to demand and force transparency. Right. It's a sad day. It's a sad day for our democracy.